Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Morgan here.
Aaron here.
David's here.
Phillips here.
Offered here.
Steele here. Okay, public comment. We're limiting, do we have a timer? 3 minutes? Anyone wishing to comment? I guess has a, go ahead, Rocky.
Thank you for the opportunity. 1 or 2 meetings ago, I requested that all of the recommendations made by this committee from the very beginnings of the committee, that they would be collected and put into a compilation that could be referred to. And so my question is, has that been done? And if it has, I would very much like an opportunity to look at it. And to me, I believe it would be a wonderful reference for not only the committee, but other interested parties.
Anybody else want to comment?
Let me check online. There's nobody online.
Okay. All right, so if we're done with that, I don't have an answer at the moment, Rocky. So I mean, I know some of the stuff that we did, but I don't know all of it. I don't even know how to go back and find what we did. I know we did the ordinances, we did the paving the fish screen, something to do with that. There's like 3 things that we did right away.
Letter of intent.
Oh, letter of intent with the city of Hillsborough. I think it was just like 3, if I remember right.
Yeah, those were the big.
Yeah.
items.
Unfinished business, current status of public work projects, reservoir is first on the list.
Yeah, so we're still working with FEMA on this one, just to catch everybody up to speed. It's a 2.1 million gallon reservoir. Things are really looking good right now. Business Oregon kind of came to the front and they're willing to throw some funding at us to make this project happen. Yeah, there again, we're just waiting on FEMA. They're getting ready to do an archaeological dig up at the reservoir to confirm that we can actually put things up there, or put the reservoir up there. No, I mean, this is it's the #1 priority on our CIP list, and I think we're almost there. I mean, we're pretty close. I mean, Shelley can speak to some of the details also with the reservoir.
I think Jason covered it. So the archaeological dig was approved for that grant, and the digging starts, I don't know when that's supposed to happen.
It's happened probably early September.
Pretty soon, and then we're waiting to hear back from FEMA directly on whether or not we get the grant, but considering they approved us for this archaeological dig, that's looking promising. And then the remaining money that we were required to come up with, 875,000 was our portion. We were able to find a grant through Business Oregon for 500,000, which we would still have to apply for, but they did the initial application for that, and they did deem us eligible to receive that funding. So we would just have to go through the formal process. And then the 375 we actually have in our SDCs. So we would have the matching funds.
Okay. That's huge. Yeah, so currently we sit at 1 million gallons in our reservoir. I mean, most people know that information. That would put us at 3.1. So that's pretty big.
So what's the water capacity out there right now? You
1
just said
million.
1 million total,
Mhm.
and you're getting a 2.1, so it will just be one reservoir, or will they both come down or one stay up?
They're both gonna stay up.
They're both gonna stay up.
Yeah, because you got 2 500s, right?
Correct.
Right. And one is insufficiently well, crumbling, I should say,
I mean, it's just, it's a structural,
getting old.
it's getting older, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
structural issue, but that's something we could look at later on, getting retrofitted to just,
At
you
some
know.
point.
Because the steel tank is still viable, right?
Correct, yeah, we had that cleaned and surveyed in a sense. They went under there and did all the regulation aspects. The concrete one obviously had pitting. Like concrete's gonna wear and tear over time with water, but yeah, the concrete or the steel one was in phenomenal shape. There's no pitting, no holes, nothing, so.
And so we have to have that inspected every how often?
We do it, we try to do it annually. And the hard part with that is finding contractors that do that type of work. I mean, the company that we used is bouncing from East Coast to West Coast, so
Yeah.
we just have to pin them down and get them in there.
Well, if you need a scuba diver, I'm one. I got the tanks and stuff to prove it. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right, so that takes us to the Merkley grant.
I'll hand this over to Shelley. She's pretty informed with the Mercury.
So the latest on the Merkley grant is we still have the money earmarked by Congress, 192,000, and we have the 48,000 match that we need in our budget. We were required to go out to bid for engineering. So that's caused some delay, so that we're in the process of doing that right now. And then as soon as we get through that step, we'll be able to secure our engineer. Once we have an engineer, then we can actually apply for the grant. So we have the money earmarked, but we still have to apply, but we can't apply until we can prove, you know, that we went out to bid for an engineer. So that's where we are with that.
So the engineer would be different than AKS?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yeah, just to catch everybody up to speed with that one. I mean, we've talked about it before. We've changed directions, but right now our primary purpose of the Merkley grant is to see that connection point to Hillsborough. And that's gonna go over Mount Richmond to Cherry Grove. Because once they put in their new plant, that's probably gonna be our easiest connection point to them. I mean, there was conversation of the railroad corridor with Carlton. That's gonna be a second study, so that we'll just have that kind of tagged and earmarked in a sense.
Aren't all three of them as part of that grant though?
They're all three part of the grant, but just the studies, you know, were high levels, Richmond corridor second, and then third was the upgrade to our transmission line from water plant to reservoir. So that's the outlay of that project or grant.
Okay, anything else that we need to, that you have on your list of things that we need to talk about?
So we've generated a number for the intake. Our in-water work window is getting pretty bleak. We have
Yeah,
till
it's
September
September
15th,
15th,
yeah. So, you know, that's something Shelley and I were just discussing. We got a pretty good number. Just wanting to work within that number a little bit to get some kind of mechanical components for operations and maintenance up there on those screens. ODFW did a phenomenal job on the design, so, and they're pretty happy with it, obviously, and our engineers are happy with it. Pretty simple, right? We're just mirroring the current intake, just to bring in more capacity to the water plant. So that's one moving forward, and then we have the Third Street, West Third to Olive water distribution line happening this summer also. That's gonna kick off probably the latter part of this month. Yeah, those are probably the two main projects we're kind of focusing on right now, with the reservoir being the lead outside of that, so.
Well, I guess that takes us on to the new business. I can't think of anything else that we, in my mind, that we need to go discuss.
I guess I did have one more thing. We did do a high level study on the impound and just seeing how much sediment was in that. I think I've said it before, I think it's 60% sediment right now. It's only increases. With that said, along with that study, you know, we're gonna kind of ask engineering to do a kind of a low level study, possibly on just doing some similar, like some HDPE pipes, something of that nature to connect that impound to our water treatment plant. That would take us out of our curtailments. You know, like we said before, and I hate to use percentages because we really don't have hard numbers, but we're probably only capturing 20% of that impound right now, currently the way it sits. So that would be a major feat too, once we kind of get over some of these other hurdles with reservoir, Merkley's grant to look at, because I think it'd be nice to supplement ourselves as long as we possibly can.
Sure.
And with the reservoir capacity, putting us in compliance there. I mean, I think we're going the right direction, obviously.
And it looks from the numbers that Angie was showing us when we came in the door, so you're still seeing, your numbers are still good up there as far as what you're taking in.
Correct. We're still bringing in the same amount off of Turner Creek as that we were bringing in probably early spring,
Mhm.
so.
And the water level's still pretty good at Turner Creek.
Yeah, it's steady. I mean, the heat, dipped it, but we did open some of the valves up there to let some of that impound water out. Before we're just taking overflow, but we did take one of those gate valves and open it up to increase Turner Creek's capacity. So,
On the new business, we have Robert in Hillsborough allowing us to use the Barney Reservoir during the summer. So I took my Warehouser map and I took a elevation map. So this is the map of Barney. The water comes in the back end. This is their outlet. Barney sits at 1,649,000 feet for elevation. And the reservoir sits at 1,480 feet, but this blind cabin, this mountain ridge right here is 2,055. There's no direct source of water or way to get water from Barney to Turner Creek. The structure, if you look at a map that shows the rivers, there's the top of the hill, everything runs to Barney, and that stuff goes down to Turner Creek, and if there's enough of a rise there that there's no direct way to get water from there to there.
Through gravity, there's no
Okay.
direct way.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to pass these handouts out to everyone. They're together, so.
Oh, they're together.
They're together, yeah.
Yeah.
These are Google maps of elevations, which I took myself driving up the Barney Reservoir yesterday. And driving past the impound, driving past the water plant. And standing at the edge of Barney Reservoir where you see the elevation at 1,738 feet was taken by my elevation and what do they call it? It's a satellite device that captures 5 satellites at a time and tracks your whereabouts, and you can actually log where it is that you're going in to get back. I forgot the name of it, but anyway, looking at these elevations, the first indication is the Barney Reservoir to the left, Turner Creek to the right. As you can see, there is a certain amount of Barney Reservoir that floods back into a kind of a cul-de-sac, if you would, or overflow area, if you would. That elevation is 1,738 feet. The elevation to the top of Turner Creek is 1,679 feet. If you look at the second drawing, it shows the line between the two being a distance of 0.79 miles as the crow flies. And the reason that that's drawn that way is because there is actually a gully or a V in the landscape that allows everything to flow down into it as if it was a creek, but it really isn't a creek, it's mostly flat. With that distance of less than a mile, I took another, let's see here, I took another reading. But let me talk about that first of all. If it's only a mile from the overflow section of Barney, which when I got out of my truck and I looked, it was about 4.5 feet deep in this overflow area, actually is probably quarter of a mile from Barney itself. So it's actually just a backflow area, but it's fairly deep and it's being fed by two other streams that you can see on this map. With the elevation of 1738, you can see the stream up above coming from three different locations, feeding down into that area. Barney Reservoir, or Barney, well, Turner Creek, by all recollections that I can figure, now this is all theory, Turner Creek cannot support water unto itself based on the hillsides. It would be almost, in my mind, a absolute impossibility that there would be enough water coming off the hillside to feed Turner Creek, even during the summertime. So, as Jason knows, there's probably some means of passage of water from Barney Reservoir being up above Turner Creek, because he knows that even the impound that he's drained before to a certain amount refills in a matter of few days to a week, and it gets no flow from hillside or anything. So there must be some, in my analogy, there must be some underground flowing of water coming from Barney, since it's the highest elevation for water and a substantial amount of water. I don't remember how many millions of gallons that Barney has, but it has quite a bit. With that said, given the fact that this is only 3/4 of a mile, 3/4 of a mile from the actual top of Turner Creek, if we could put in a pipe, if we could, it wouldn't be a whole lot of money. It wouldn't take a long period of time. It would be something that should be gated so that the inflow coming from Barney can be controlled to a certain extent, especially given the fact that Hillsborough Water owns Barney Reservoir. And whether or not Hillsborough would allow us to use their water that's untreated to feed Turner Creek is another question. From what I understand, there was a study done. Am I not correct, Jason? About,
There wasn't a study done in regards to raw water source.
oh, there wasn't.
No,
Okay,
the study was from our impound to our treatment plant.
I see. Okay. Which is the next part of what I was going to talk about. Like Jason says, he believes only 10, 12, 14% of the water coming out of our impound is actually being used because of the length and distance from the impound to the treatment plant. And with that said, if we were to put a pipe in, as whether Google's right or not, I can't say, but this is the distance from the impound to the water treatment plant, which is 2.5 miles. 2.5 miles of pipe isn't really all that bad if you're talking about capturing 100% of the impound water being delivered to the treatment plant. So we're looking at two different options here. One is an immediate fix which we know the impound has water. And if we piped it for 2.5 miles from the impound to the treatment plant, we would capture 75–80% more water. If we put a pipe in from, given Hillsborough's permission, a pipe from Bonnie to Turner Creek, we would be money ahead. Time-wise, we would be farther ahead. The Hillsborough aspect of hooking up to Hillsborough is going to be, as I've understood it, it's 5 years out at least. Some $40–50 million, you know, that our city doesn't have, but piping like this, even though it's a quick fix, it could be long lasting and valuable to our situation here. Like I said, I believe that the impound and Turner Creek is getting its water underground somehow from Bonnie. However, you know, that's all theory, and we would need somebody to prove that out if that was the case, but.
Some of this addressed in the water master plan. I think I was
Not to this
reading.
regards.
But being third on the list for water rights, and I mean third, not second, not first, but third on the list for water rights. If number 1 or number 2 claims that they want their water, we would be obligated to give them their water, regardless of what our city would get out of this or not. Which is my third situation that I'd like to see us resolve. We need first person water rights on Turner Creek. Whether we can buy them, trade them, convince the first and the second water right users to work some sort of a deal. But we need first or at least second water right user permissions. Third is third to in my mind is last. Questions?
No, but I'll address a couple things. So we work up here every day. So there is no direct route from Barney Reservoir to Turner Creek. There's nothing that's not gonna have some kind of a rise. So you're gonna have a pump. You're not just gonna get it to flow directly.
So you're saying that the gully,
That the water runs
That the
to
water-
Barney from, not to Turner Creek. All this water that's coming down this way runs into the back of Barney. It does not go down to Turner Creek.
no, I know it doesn't go down to Turner Creek, but if you walked
Cause you go up and over a hill and drop down into Barney.
So
Driving-
the hill's Skyline Road, and
Skyline.
elevation on Skyline's 2,300 feet, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
driving,
So there is a considerable elevation change. Elevation at Barney's 1640, the elevation where you're looking at is 1738.
yeah. But
So
she's
that
talking
reservoir
about,
there, I'm not sure that that's even belonging to Hillsborough.
she's talking about driving though. I'm talking about the actual,
About moving water from this place to
the
that. place.
actual contour of the land goes down to a valley, and that valley is constant all the way through.
You've walked that?
I don't think that's right.
I don't think you're right, because I'm just telling you, we work up there every day. As far as the water in the ground program, we'll be putting in a new road for Warehouser, and you come to a water, you're digging, no water, everything's dry as a gully. You take one scoop out and all of a sudden you've got a 2 or 3 inch spout of water coming out of the ground. And we have to French drain it, and so there is so much water underground up there that you don't realize is there until you start digging. Because I know that Turner Creek is probably supported by a lot of underground springs. Because when we're working up there on Flora and all those places, I mean, we get into those road systems and we run into so much water sometimes, it's crazy. that you can't pipe it to where it needs to go.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's what we run into when we're working up there all the time, and we
So-
work on
Two.
this side, blind cabin. We work on this side of the hill, we don't work on the Barney side of the hill. So,
Right. So when you drive it though, you're driving up, around, you're driving all the way around and going up over that hillside.
mhm.
But if you go to the top of that hillside and you look down, it goes into a valley.
It doesn't go directly to Turner Creek. Anyway,
Mr. Davis, we actually have two water rates.
how what?
We have two water rates.
To the Turner Creek?
Yeah.
So who is the, I'm not trying to change the subject, but
No,
who's
no,
the
no.
first?
Go ahead.
Who is the first water right person? Do we have a name? I'm just curious who they are.
It just says we have two that allow for maximum.
On record,
Oh, okay.
for certain reasons.
Yeah, that's, I actually have the water rights.
I think that the reality here is we can't work in theory. You know what I mean? I mean, I think we've had a game plan here for the last 2 to 3 years, and I think we just need to keep pushing in that direction. What people aren't accounting for is the age and deterioration of the water treatment plant.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one component here where if there was a structural damage, we wouldn't recoup that. And to have a backup plan B is the best possible route for the city to go.
And the city of Hillsborough would be there.
Well, so the other aspect that you need to look at when we decide that we're gonna become, hooked into Hillsborough directly, or when we talk to the guys from McMinnville that we're gonna bring water out through Carlton. We become dependent to what their rates are and to what their infrastructure is.
Forever.
And forever, and then we get to sit and wait every year for the information on what we're gonna get to pay for water, and then pass that along.
Yep.
The difference with Barney is that Barney has challenges for sure. And I'm not sure, I have looked at this fairly extensively. I've never found that passageway that Bob's talking about, although it would be amazing if that was there. But through a system of pumps, we've never, ever had a water shortage in Yam Hill in the wintertime. Right? I mean,
Not
it
in the
rains
winter.
and the water comes down. So the lash up is with Barney. You're looking at having to pump water, just under 1,000 feet in the air. I mean, that takes massive, probably diesel pumps in order to bring that over the top. But the beauty of it is that's mostly BLM and Forest Service land up there in that direct line between the two. That said, an above ground piping system like what they utilize at the Christensen Water Plant in California. If you were to pipe directly into Barney, so move it the extra quarter mile over into Barney. And if you pumped summertime only, diesel generators on semi-truck, up over the top and refilled our reservoir. In the wintertime, you open up a petcock on either side of it, drain the water out because you don't need it. You don't need to bury that. So the lash up there is yes, we do have an older water treatment plant, but it's ours. And the potential for getting water that short of a distance, there's all sorts of different avenues to look at with that. You're not looking at landowners, you're not like trying to dig up somebody's backyard, it's kind of a blessing to have that be primarily government controlled land. I don't think that it should be something that should be left off the table. Barney has 14,886 acre feet of drinking water available a day, which is 325,851 gallons, which isn't a ton of water. But at the worst that Yam Hill's ever had, that fixes our problem daily.
In the summer or the winter.
That's what they will allow to be pulled off that is available current today of water that they would sell. What we're buying is untreated water.
Right.
And we're running our own lines. Nobody's ever asked Hillsborough what that costs, but I promise you it costs less than bringing it in through another line.
It was an option,
Yeah.
and this committee decided to go the other route.
So the other route, you can't intermix the water. Right? Because if Hillsborough treats with their chemicals and you treat with your chemicals, that's against the law, from what I understood from the engineers. When we had the meeting with McMinnville, That if we were to bring in water from, treated water from an outside source,
Strictly distribution.
we have to shut our plant down completely and abandon it.
So
Strictly.
you can't use Hillsborough as a backup for emergencies and continue to use our plant?
You would have to purge the entire lines. Right? You'd have to,
No.
well, that'd be mixing water otherwise, yeah?
Yeah, but our components, that's why we went with Hillsborough, is because the components of what their makeup is with their water compared to McMinnville was closer to ours in a sense.
So you're saying that Hillsborough water could be intermixed with our
Yes.
water? Okay,
Which would allow us to keep our plant
Because
operating?
yeah, I mean, they go through a series of making sure that their water is drinkable water. So in a sense, we wouldn't have to purge our lines to drink their water.
But Jason, wasn't it talked about though, only getting a supplement from
It's a
Hillsborough?
supplement. It's roughly 300 gallons per minute, I want to say.
Yeah, and wasn't that discouraged because of the cost of everything involved? And because of,
We upped our emergency service from them as far as the intake from gallons per minute, because what we said is initially we wanted like 150. Well, they said at that point, then you would have to do E. coli test on that line, because if you have that line down for any period.
that's right,
So it was a continuation of feeding into our system.
right.
A small amount, a smaller amount.
Smaller amount. Yeah. I mean, I agree with the raw source. It's just, that's, you know, we put our letter of intent in for treated water because of the components with the water treatment plant being aged. I mean, I agree. I mean, personally, I would go after their raw source and their treated source.
no, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having another source that was there through Hillsborough for an emergency situation. And there's a lot of people that would like to have a lot more water. I mean, there's hookups that would be available from Gaston all the way into Carlton from, you know, just surrounding us.
That would be the Carlton, the railroad line.
That would be Carlton Railroad line, or to have spurs that come off over Cherry Grove. I mean, there's infinite possibilities. My thing is I don't think that we should sit ourselves into a situation where we're looking at running pipes for, you know, huge, long lengths that we talk about for 10 years and never get a drop of water. If there's a faster, easier way to get it,
Yeah.
let's maybe keep that on the table at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean we have to abandon Merkley and we don't have to, but why not look at all of the things?
And, you know, we did, we looked at it. We never came to a cost with the raw water source just because we geared everything towards the treated source. No, you know, I just want everybody to understand too, I mean. Water anymore, the water source, it's the big players are playing the game.
Mhm.
You know, if you look around, you look at Lafayette, soon to be Dayton, you look at Carlton. I don't know where Amity stands, but pretty much you're just in the distribution game now.
Yeah.
You're not in the treatment game anymore. And as this system goes longer and deeper, then you only have junior right user process on your creek, on a creek.
Mhm.
And then you're talking about getting a raw water source from Barney, they're still gonna control you, no matter what. So in an emergency sense, if something was to happen, I'm just gonna lay this out there. You know, say you had something go on that creek, in a sense, like you had, what's the word I'm looking for, say, you know, it dammed up somehow. Then all of a sudden you've lost that source. Then you're in a real emergency, and then getting into that wind and water work window to get that out of there, whatever may happen, landslide, whatever it may be. Then you're talking about the
Absolutely.
filtration aspect that, which, to be honest with you, Shay, I don't think we have the components up there to filtrate some heavy sediment that would come down, that would ruin those filters. We have two very small filters. So then everybody's on boil water notices, and we don't have that second source.
So what do we do with, so Hillsborough's water comes from
I will
Wilson.
say this, and I want everybody to understand, we looked at every possible option. We had land out there. We looked at putting in a second impound at that
Correct.
level off the creek, right? We've looked at the raw water source. We've looked at dredging, which needs to happen up there in the impound. We've looked at the treated water sources. I'm just thinking for the city itself, long-term, you know, if we want to think 5 years, yeah, the raw water source is a great idea. But if you want this community to survive 20, 25, 30 years, you're gonna have to get into the distribution game. I mean, we're in global water now, like, it's not about Turner Creek supplementing us or Barney. You're basically gonna be on a loop system. Pretty soon, McMinnville, Newburgh, Tualatin Valley, all of them are gonna be looped in with one another, Sherwood, and you wanna be part of that loop.
A lot of region.
Yes.
Yeah.
But wouldn't they have, I mean, who else could possibly use that water from Barton? There's no other community.
No.
So it sits there and it becomes less valuable to Hillsborough than other options.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, it's something if this,
But when you talk about
Community
looping
wants to
into a
go back.
global system or a regional water system, so then what you're looking at is you actually now have access to more water than some people, Dayton or Amity or any of those guys. And so you can be actually a provider of water.
Why would?
I don't know
Hill-
how that works with
Yeah.
Willing Water. I mean, that's something.
Well, that's what you brought up, was that
Well,
we'd all
I mean,
be tied
yeah, I
together,
mean,
so there'd
but-
be sources from multiple
Yeah, exactly.
locations.
Why would the city
It
of
is.
Hillsborough stop processing water out of Barney?
They don't process water out of Barney.
Who does?
No one. It's idle. It's available water. That's not being currently used by any municipalities.
So where does,
I think they do use Barney. I mean.
that's why they
just
pumped
me,
it down
just
last
looking
year. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
it's extremely low right now.
yeah, they
Yeah,
use it.
They use it. I believe they use
Yeah, I was under, because isn't that where
it. They even have.
the
water
Cherry
sheds up
Grove
there.
gets their water is sourced out there?
Yeah, it's not idle water by any means. They have watershed up there.
Yeah.
So I know they take care of that. And use
No,
it.
no, I mean, as far as nobody's purchasing that water currently.
I think they're using it.
So,
It is, I mean, it is and always has been an alternative. I mean, it's an option. I think the committee, you know, in years past has looked at it like, are we planning for year 2, year 5? Are we planning for 20 years? You know, do you wanna put all that money and resource into a raw water source? I mean, I understand where you're coming from, Shay. That's why we looked at every alternative.
but when you speak also of, what about a landslide? What about this? What about that? So Hillsborough water right now, that we'd be drawing from comes out of the Willamette River at Wilsonville. Right? That's their source that they mentioned during the meeting. So that means you're running a line from Wilsonville into the Hillsborough region, from Hillsborough through Gaston and Yam Hill. What do you do in an earthquake?
Well, that's, I mean,
Well, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like you're talking about natural disaster and what could go wrong. Well, now you're
I'm
talking
just
about
talking about
75
our
mile
source currently, our source currently. That's
Yeah.
what bothers me is,
I'm just saying, I don't think it's a wise idea to take anything off the table when when the answer hasn't been completely
yeah, I
found.
mean, nothing's off the table.
Yeah.
You know, we just directed that letter of intent to be, you know, treated water.
Sure. Like you said, if they're intermixed and we get a Merkley grant that takes care of that planning and that we figure out a way to get it hooked up, then that's wonderful. And there's nothing wrong with having the Barney option as well. I mean, there's never been a community that says, my God, our biggest problem is we have too much water.
Really?
You know what I mean? Hook up to where you can, and run what you can.
Know about it,
Yeah.
but find a direction, because I'm not gonna continue to go back to the city of Hillsborough with second,
Hey,
third,
yeah.
fourth options. Like, you guys just need to figure out what you feel like you need to do at the administration, the council, and then we can go after it. But we've prolonged these talks and we've fiddled with that conversation for almost 3 years now.
Sure.
So it's just like, I don't wanna keep going back.
Well,
I
and
mean, if we
Jason,
want
I
a raw
understand your
source, We
frustration.
want a distribution source, like, I'm just the middleman. I'm just trying to make that connection so that.
I understand that completely, and your frustration's
Water.
understood. Just know that part of the reason that I'm here is because I share the frustration. Right, because we keep hearing about this might happen, this might happen, and this might happen, and here we are, what, 3-4 years past the water emergency, and there's not one drop of new water.
Exactly.
And there's not a plant there, and there's not a shovel on the
And
ground.
that's what I'm saying.
There's no
it's
easy
like-
answer to that,
Sure,
easy access to water, and I think I'm thinking about that we're up there working every day. I don't even know what kind of line you would put above ground that would stay together or not burn up or get shot a hole in from people hunting. I don't even know what you'd put up there.
well, I mean, that would be something that you'd have to look into for sure, but
So you have to bore that line.
Yeah, and that,
bore that line? You mean bury the line or bore the line?
Or you'd have to go underground.
The bore is too long you can't vertically.
Yeah, you can connect bores.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
He's only talking.
I'm talking about price wise,
He's
if you
only
look
talking
into
about-
what that costs to actually drill a hole for 2 miles.
That's a
Under
lot
a
cheaper,
mountain,
that's a lot cheaper than going above ground.
okay,
A lot cheaper.
So backing up. Water treatment plant. You said it has a life expectancy now of what?
Well, we've done a fairly good job and, you know, people in the past have done a good job treating and taking care of that facility, but I wouldn't put a stamp, a time stamp on what that, you know,
So
water plant's gonna hold up to.
what would need to be replaced or modified or
I think
would
you're-
the whole
I think-
plant have to be rebuilt from the ground up? My question is, as we talked a few days ago, why didn't they put this water plant on the Yamhill River?
Right.
Why couldn't we, at some later point, put our water plant on the Yamhill River
I mean,
and
you,
become a source?
you're just getting into water right issues. I mean, I could answer that for you right now, Robert. I mean, that's all theory there again. Like, I feel like we just need to work collectively towards a goal. You know, that's what I'm getting at is we've scattered grants, we've attempted to get grants, we've done studies. I mean, it's getting to the point and to the degree that, like Shay said, the frustration for me is we have one committee that wants to go this way, and now we have another committee wants to go this way, and you can't just keep flip-flopping all the way through this relationship with another municipality. Like, we have to have a direction, and without that direction, we don't have the goal, and if we don't have the goal, we're never gonna get there. So it's come to a conformative agreement and make your choice. If it's raw water or treated water, if it's both, so be it, and then look at those costs. And then look at your future plans and say to yourself, is that the growth we're gonna be able to have? Is this what we're gonna need? You know, and you have to look at every angle, right? You have to look at
Right.
just everyday distribution,
So
you have
that's-
to look at cost, you have to look at loss of SDCs, you have to look at possible infrastructure damage. I mean, it's so much and overwhelming, but we can get there if we just have a solidified goal.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about doing something right now. I was talking about in the future, a 50-year
But
plan.
we're talking about now, and it gets me so emotional because it's like, everything's based on theory. Like, just make a choice, make a decision and drive forward. Like, I just,
So Jason, are you not going forward with the Hillsborough thing, or is it
we are.
a?
We are, and that's why these grants have to partake and play a role. Because we don't have fiscal dollars to get us there.
Right.
So it's like, if we're gonna go chase the Merkley, now we're gonna have to change the Merkley to look at the raw water source instead of the Richmond or the corridor or the impound. You know, it's like, that's the thing. You know, Shelley's doing a lot of work to make sure that this Merkley grant's pointed 3 different directions. Now we're talking about adding 4th and 5th and different layers, and all of a sudden, you know, we take that out to bid and those aren't there, you know, then we're paying for it with contingency that we barely have. So,
Well, and the reason that I ask is because there's a lot of things that come into play. And personally, I mean, God only knows how much longer I'm gonna live, you know, I mean, I want consistent water until I'm dead. And so the agreement was that, you know, you all were gonna go after the Hillsborough pipeline and then talk to Carlton. They were on board initially, and then there was hearsay that now they're not going to. I don't know what the deal is with that. But personally, living here, I want water that I know I'm gonna get every day. You know, with the exception of, God forbid, an earthquake or something to that effect.
That's something we can't predict.
Right, and so, yeah, it'd be great to have this as a backup for whatever reason, but my personal feeling is I think that should be number one, and then look at the rest after the fact.
yeah, the reality is that there's gonna come a point in time in this city's existence where they're not gonna control their water. Right, I'll be honest.
Why?
Because you guys are the junior right users on a creek.
Right, so you have to change the source.
You have to. So if you go raw source and you go to Barney, Hillsborough still controls that cost.
At a much less rate than if it comes out of a treated water plant from them.
Yeah, I mean, today,
Mhm.
And like Patty said, whatever direction you guys wanna go, I just want consistent water.
I think if Yamhill doesn't get in the game with the water looping program, we're gonna be sitting here looking pretty stupid.
And
At
the
some
dollars are
point in
only gonna
time.
go up,
Right,
they're
Yeah,
gonna go way up.
yeah, because I know Backwater and Light has purchased the Willamette River, and they're already planning that, and they've already bought property, put their site in.
Yep, they came and talked to us about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so if we don't get on board with somebody, we're gonna be sitting here with nothing.
I mean, nobody wants to pay higher water rates, and yes, Hillsborough water rates are expensive, I looked at them when this all got started, and it's not cheap, but unfortunately nowadays, nothing's cheap.
Nothing's cheap.
And right now, the city of Yamhill has really low water rates compared to other places.
You wouldn't have known that when the water rates went up.
No,
There were some real mad people.
I know they were,
Yeah.
but we don't pay a lot for water,
Well,
you know?
A couple things too. One, I was late to this meeting because I was actually hanging up from a phone call regarding Carlton and Hillsborough. So they're still on board with looking at that and potentially working with us if it makes sense. So just to clarify that. And also, I think McMinnville's much, much higher than Hillsborough from what I've heard. And thirdly, for whatever that's worth. But thirdly, we did have a conversation with the governor's liaison for water, Jason and I did. And one of the things we discussed was the fact that these bigger cities are charging such high rates to some of these smaller municipalities, they just can't afford it. And her comment back was, you know, that's a recurring theme I'm hearing from a lot, and maybe there's a regional solution we can come up, whether it's capping wages to certain cities under certain populations or something, but they're aware. And so that could be a potential conversation for how we make this work for smaller cities if we are inevitably gonna be, you know, receiving water from the bigger places. So that's just, you know, information for what it's worth for a regional.
And isn't Cove Orchard wanting to get on board with this too?
I don't know about that. I
Yes.
haven't-
Because their water is horrendous.
they're LA water.
They're
Yes.
Are they LA
restricting.
water or are they Hillsborough water?
for LA water.
LA
LA
water.
water, yeah.
Well, but then there's a lot of people that are in there that have wells that are salt.
Oh, yeah, we have them at our place too.
George has one, our neighbor.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, but Hillsborough at this point won't let them connect.
Mhm.
They won't, you know, and they're not that far from Gaston. Anyway, either way,
There's someone out on the districts that's complaining about not being able to hook onto in Yamhill, so it's, you know, it's part of the game, but.
yeah.
But I think that when we went with the city of Hillsborough direction when we were talking about it, because Mac Water and Light had restrictions on the water use, the no growth. There was no growth. You couldn't count any growth with the Mac Water and Light system. So, and Hillsborough didn't have that restriction.
And weren't they cheaper too?
I don't know. McMinnville Water and Light usually keeps their stuff, like their power is cheap compared to what everybody else pays because they've got a 100-year plan and they're not chasing their hind ennies all the time. They're ahead of the game most of the time, so,
Mhm.
but anyway. So it's, I think the direction that we're headed with the Merkley grant and the study for the city of Hillsborough is personally, I think, still the direction that we need to go for the city of Yamhill to have a consistent water source.
I believe that's the direction council has recommended we're moving it in so far. So until that changes, that's what we'll be pursuing. You want to add a new study with this, that's a different conversation, but I don't think that changes the Merkley.
Mhm.
No, and that's the reason I brought this up was as an alternative that I think shouldn't be overlooked. Like Mr. Corrigan says, we need to keep all our options open, no matter how slight, because water is going to be the #1 finite item in the world that is going to be necessity or necessary to keep living with because the whole world is looking for water right now. And climate change isn't helping.
We don't need to go there.
No.
All right, so does that move us on to district contracts? Which that is the city staff is doing, working or doing, gonna do something with contracts at some point in time.
Are you familiar with it?
I mean, I'm aware we have them, but to be honest, I have not spent any time studying that, so I don't know a lot about that.
Because I know that when we were doing the rate study stuff and Tim, was it Tim was sitting here and I mentioned something about the surplus water statement in the district contracts. He said it depends on what your water rights state as to whether or not you have to have that statement in there. So if you got rid of the surplus statement in the district contracts, that would not make that water, you would be able to count the gallons or the people using the water for your urban growth boundary. And that would take care of some of that problem. If the water districts were considered part of the city as far as a user, water user, and not a supplement, it would help with how much water is used and how you calculate your stuff for that, but how much water is available to be used versus not counting the gallons used by the districts.
What's the verbiage, Kathy, that needs to be removed from the contract?
Surplus,
Surplus.
Okay,
surplus water.
But that depends on our water rates.
He said it's something to do, it says on what it states in your water rights, and see, I'm not a water right person, I have no idea if your water right has a statement in there that says something about what the water can be used for. Or what,
I'll have to look at.
and then,
Now you're talking about Yamhill water rights, right?
Yamhill water right on Turner Creek, is what he was insinuating, so I don't know what he meant by that, and
And who is this that spoke of this, Kathy?
Tim Tice from,
Tim Tice, yeah.
And it's also in the water master plan, the water rates. So if anyone wants to go read that.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's one of the things. And as far as the district contract, speaking as a district person, in the sixties, when the water lines were all put in with the city stuff, I don't believe they probably even had a contract at that time. There was no statement about domestic water use either, because all the people that out our direction that came onto the city water line at that time had livestock. And that was the reason that they ran the line. Because they all had farms, they all had cows or pigs or whatever they had. And so most everybody was using that for farm use water, not domestic water. Most of it was that way back then. And that's another statement that's in there. That's gonna be hard, it's a hard one to swallow as a district person because most everybody has an animal in their backyard or in their pasture or whatever, you know, so.
Or growing mushrooms.
Are growing mushrooms, which, you know,
What's the goal with the districts then? I mean, does this committee have
I think that it was stated that the city of Yamhill, whatever staff was going to take care of the contracts. We haven't renewed one for quite a while, as far as that goes, as far as the contracts with the district and the city.
So we need to look at the contract, see what language needs to be removed and.
Or what needs to be looked at or how changes need to be made to make them, at least try to get it to the point where you can count that water as city water used and not have to eliminate that when you're doing your study for allowing more housing to come into
What are
play.
those contracts regularly reviewed and updated? Is there?
Shay, you looked at them.
It's,
they're supposed
we
to
were like
be yearly.
I don't mind doesn't say that in there, but it's in the eighties, I think it's the last time we redid them, but
1980s.
everybody has their number of users on each district. Like we have 33 users that can be on our district and we have 33 meters, well, 33 people that are paying for meters. And we can't add another person. Back in 2000, right around 2000, 99, they didn't have a moratorium Because we put their, part of our line got replaced by Willa Kenzie, a vineyard up there, and they put a whole new line in, and at that time, we came on at our house. And Murray Payola came on, a few new people came on at that time, to the city water system. So, but after that, when we had, I think the next year or two, we had a shortage issue. So a moratorium got put on everybody as far as how many outside hookups each district can have. And and there's one new person out here off of Adcock Road that their well's going bad and they're crying the blues about not being able to hook on, and they have that Pleasant View, right? Pleasant Valley. They have all their hookups are spoken for. So, and I told the guy, I said, you'd have to go try to plead your case in the city of Yamhill and see if they would allow another hookup for that district for you to come on. But I don't know what they've done as far as, you know, adding, but you, when you start doing that, keep your seats empty because you're gonna have a lot more people in here doing the same thing.
So what did you say you found when you looked at the contracts?
So the contracts, they speak about council reviewing them annually in January to see if there was going to be enough water for those districts. If the council deems there will not be enough water that year, then those outside users would be turned off first. This is loosely what that says. That is not a popular opinion. And
Has that
should
ever
never-
happened?
No, not to my knowledge. Kathy, you would probably be able to speak better to that.
No, it's never happened.
And it should never happen.
No.
No,
But
and I will say that when the last curtailments that we had, the most reactive people were the water districts. I called them all up, everybody, it was amazing what the water districts did, so.
You're talking about during the curtailment?
And that's why, to me, that's why I put on here the district contracts and merging the outside water districts with the city somehow, as far as the water is concerned, because everybody is pushing to enlarge our urban, you know, boundaries. And at this point, since I've been here for 20 years, there's been a growth of between 160 and 200 homes. I don't know how many is down there in that new subdivision. So with the urban growth boundary wanting to be enlarged and the amount of people that are on here now, with the outside water districts taking about 70% of our water, that means potentially we could double in size and the outside water districts would not be taken into consideration.
They would still be allowed to use that much, you're saying?
I'm just saying that potentially with the outside water districts using about 70% of the water right now, because they're not counted when
Is using
a
our
builder
water.
comes in or whatever, then we could actually technically double in size and the water districts wouldn't be even accounted for because that's how much water we have available per se.
The way it was explained to me during the planning commission when the new development was going in was that regardless of outside water users, the way it's currently set up,
Right,
if there's an urban growth boundary that has vacant land
right,
and you want to build whatever you want to build that follows code and criteria,
right,
you must let them build it.
right.
And that water then that's part of the city. And if they say, well, the amount of water therefore means that that district and that district and that district must be turned off, legally you have to turn that off.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to get those water districts somehow included in the city water. Because if it's not, it doesn't matter what happens, we're not gonna have enough water to supply everybody. It's either that,
Without turning off.
exactly,
Mhm.
So
exactly,
you're turning off people that have been paying into the system, same as everybody else since 1960.
And like I said, you guys were the ones that were following,
You know, so it's a
never
hard
done it.
pill to swallow.
but the districts didn't find out about the water shortage until a month after the fact.
No, that's not correct. Patty, I sent them all an email. I contacted every one of them.
I
That's what
contacted
was talked
Kathy.
about in a council meeting.
I contacted Kathy, and Kathy and I got a hold of everyone,
All
and it was
districts.
that level one. I said, hey, this is what's happening. And I called all the big users, I called all the water districts, everybody knew well ahead.
Mushroom plant started.
So what she's speaking of is there was a couple public comments made of people that were not. If I remember correctly, the people that were spoke of, I had no idea about it. Also didn't know who to call in their water district, who was in charge. There were people that had purposely left themselves out, or I don't know how it happened, but they didn't know who to call and they were unaware. And
And again, it's hard to fix that because I
yeah, you
know
can't fix that for
that I
everybody.
send a bill out every month. It's got my phone number on it. So we actually had a water leak, a personal user water leak on Gielan Road. They called 911
Oh.
this summer. Kyle called me on a Saturday or a Sunday and said, you guys got a major water leak. And I says, what? And so I drive down there and look at it. It's their water leak, past their meter, on their property, running out on the ground.
Oh, my.
It took them 3 months to fix it, $800 water bill, and I kept saying, you guys need to fix this. I called them more than once. And so you can't fix those.
Nope, you can't.
I mean, I don't care how hard you try.
Can I ask a quick question with regard to what you're talking about, the adding the districts to the water user number?
Mhm.
Has that ever been attempted or,
No.
okay, so is there any reason why we
I don't know
haven't
why.
done that?
Because we've been classified as a supplement or outside water districts. I'm not sure. That's a research in my mind that needs to happen to see if we can get rid of that statement and
Is
allow it.
that, so is that something this council wants, or this committee rather wants to pursue then, to find that?
Well, let me.
Well, it would be associated with contracts, because in the contracts, if I'm not mistaken, it's considered surplus, it states
It
surplus
says
water.
state surplus
The
water.
districts are considered surplus?
Yes,
Mhm.
So I think those are two totally separate issues currently.
no, because surplus water means that
Right, extra.
it-
The city
it's,
doesn't need.
right, we don't need it, but if we were to build, which,
You have a lot of more urban growth boundary. You got a lot of farmers that wanna sell their.
right,
I
exactly,
understand that.
yeah.
So,
And so if they were to build another, I mean, potentially,
200
they could build 200 to 500 more homes.
Or if we want to develop downtown or develop some parks, we need water for all that.
Mhm.
Well, but the point is because of the amount of water that the districts are using versus the city, we have all kinds of water to build, according to builders. So that either has to stop,
So the contracts are with the district and the city, correct?
Mhm.
yes.
each district has its own
So we just
contract.
need to look at the contracts and see what that language looks like and then determine.
And then you have the water line users, correct? And they're not,
Mainline.
the mainline users.
Say, can you say that
There's a
again?
mainline user also.
Yeah.
But we
On
also
the,
make them sign.
they have a type of contract, but they're on the line coming in to town. We got through their property and they says, hey, I'm on the water hookup, why you going through my property?
But there's also one district that doesn't have a contract at all.
That's not true.
No, that
Are
is
you
true.
talking about out here on Dreyer Lane?
Yes,
Yes.
There's a contract. I can go get it right now.
so that's just been done within the last couple of years.
It was done when it was brought up, and actually, I think some homes have been removed from
In
there.
2021?
Mhm.
Okay,
So I want to clarify, who's not counting, who's considering it surplus, the state or the city?
the contracts,
City contract.
Contract.
all the
So it's strictly our
contracts.
own language in those contracts that's creating this.
Mhm.
But then Kathy thought maybe it had to do with our.
Water rights. So it's something that needs to be researched at some point. Someone needs to say, our water rights don't have that specification in there. We don't have, and I don't. The surplus water statement got put in there in the contracts after the fact at some point in time.
Okay.
So, cause I know back in the sixties, they didn't.
anything when you said you review them? Anything that was different than that?
So I think that where we are right now is talking about discussing and reviewing the contracts, and it's been a year. So to be quite honest, I'd rather review them before I speak about something that I,
Yeah,
my
exactly.
age, after a year,
And I haven't read mine
I
yet.
might forget a
I
few
don't-
items that are good
It's just-
details.
I need to kind of make a clarification too. The one on Dryer Lane is not a water district. It was just one master meter feeding the homes that were there. I labeled them as a district for proper billing. So they were not a district, and we had them sign a contract.
And when I was contacting the districts and got email addresses, and so I could send them information or whatever, they have never responded. I've never gotten a phone call back from them or anything from that district as far as any kind of keeping them in the loop as far as what's going on with the water, so.
So let's go to the source here as to who manages our water system, which is Jason and his crew. And ask Jason again. You have stated before that you would be willing to see the outside water districts come on board in the city as long as their piping and their standards were up to city code?
Well, if we
Or
created a standard in a proper IGA, yeah.
IGA, right, right. And somebody asked me if that was the case and you're adding, I don't know, let's say 40 miles of pipe to the system. Let's just use that as a figure. Wouldn't that increase your, wouldn't that cost you more people and more
Of course.
equipment and more time to manage those extra 40 miles of pipeline?
Of course.
Yeah, so so the city wouldn't be able to, based on its flat water rate right now, wouldn't be able to sustain 167 outside water users who would just miraculously become part of the city's water system without some sort of pittance of payment or you see what I'm getting at?
You're not gonna add any income by doing that because we're already paying water rates. So to add them on, you're adding an expense, not an income.
Right,
And the only thing it might save is each individual, we have to do our own water testing and stuff, that might eliminate that. But as far as the rest of it, the lines and the meters and the backflow valves and everything, that would be a
So
cost
I
for
wonder
the
if-
city.
Just remove, if there's a way just to remove that surplus language, then that takes care of it.
Right, that's my, because I think
Check with legal.
you're a long ways from sitting at a table to getting all these districts to merge into the city. I don't personally, I don't see that happening because there's concern.
What's that?
Because each water district, all the users have a say on what happens supposedly on their line, other than they can't really argue the increases that we're taking. But, you know, but how to fix things or how to do things, but,
Do you foresee a problem on their end with removing that surplus
oh,
language?
hell no.
Let's just talk to-
Did I say that correctly?
Well, but part of the thing too is if you remove that language, there will be some people inside the city and some builders that say that you've just done them a disservice. So that's why it's important to check with legal to make sure,
Well, yeah, you'd have to.
right? Because if we added 10 new water districts and made a part of the city and then next year it doesn't rain and the
But
water gets
you-
turned off, I mean, every single person in town is gonna sue the city.
You're not adding them, you're just
Right.
Changing the language to
You're
make, yep.
changing the language and you're changing people that have been using the water since the sixties.
I'm just saying double check with legal to the
Oh, sure.
verbiage on the, to, because that's a safety valve.
There's a
right, for
reason
the
why that's
city
in there and I don't know why.
residents. Yep.
I know it was reviewed, Buttercup, when they lifted it for a short time on the Buttercup people, and they signed a specific water contract. And theirs specifically was inside domestic use only.
Yeah, theirs was, yeah. Cause
That was the last time water, the surplus water contract was reviewed.
Mhm.
And they're
I think
individual,
another aspect too, and that could be wrong, is if you remove the surplus and you remove the outside water district, then all of a sudden your rates change. Because we supplement them at a different rate, so they would become in city.
Well, I don't know, I think you can still structure your rates the same, but I wouldn't mind them decrease, but anyway, I mean, because I realize the people in town complained about their $10, whatever it was, increase. Mine doubled. I went from 60 to 100 plus every month. So it's not, and I'm not saying that we
No, no.
didn't, we had that coming, but when you start complaining about the water rates, the districts took a hit because supposedly we were behind. Because we have to add on to ours, we have insurance, we have meters, we have line, we have water testing, and I get paid a whopping $150 a month. So it is, every district has its own expenses to deal with. And we used to do volunteerism, but now it's pretty hard to find anybody that wants to volunteer to get in the ditch to fix a water line.
So just in looking for direction from this committee, then, do you want to have a smaller group review the contracts? Does everyone want to take a look at contracts? Like, what's the next steps? Or do you want me to look at them and talk to legal and?
I would say the
Or
next
back.
step is for the city of Yam Hill to look at the contracts, talk to legal, see why that's there, and if it can be removed or not.
For the most part, the contracts are all the same. And the only reason I know that is because I went through and I looked at every
Okay.
single one of them. And I have a little
Excel spreadsheet?
well, no, it's just highlights of them.
Okay,
And so they're for the most part the same.
okay,
But it's the surplus water
okay.
that is a concern of mine because of the building.
Well, then we'll just look at that between now and next meeting and bring back an answer for this committee.
Yeah, that'd be great. So that's, I see is for the districts is the biggest issue is when you start reviewing the contracts is. And for the city to not be able to use that water
Towards this.
challenging, whatever,
Yeah.
towards that urban growth boundary.
it's the first red paragraph. Your question.
And I don't know if you all remember when they had the public hearing for this subdivision over here. But I'm not one to usually blurt things out without being called on or whatever. But the developer and his attorney was sitting right over there, and I was sitting over here. And he was saying, oh yeah, there'll be plenty of water and blah, blah, blah. And I blurted out, you are lying through your teeth. And then I went off. I didn't swear. I didn't get out of my chair, but I mean, he was lying. And I got the wrath of people, on outside of town and all that, how I shouldn't have said that. And I happened to be running for city council at the same time. Do you really want somebody on city council that screams in the meetings? Well, I didn't scream, but anyway. So, yeah, I mean, that's what's gonna happen again if we don't get this fixed.
Okay,
Well, that's, I believe
So,
you
is this
make
my
that
copy
statement that
or
you
do I
fixed
need to
enough
go
in
back
water
to-
links to pay.
You can have it.
I'll read it.
Yeah, Jason had got enough water links repaired and fixed that the water loss went down, that you had plenty of water for the water usage for the new houses that went in, because they had some massive leaks. And they got them fixed.
That's the newest one.
The latest.
Anybody else? Got anything else? If not,
Sewer system, are we good on the sewer system?
that's not part of the water
Yeah,
district.
that's-
We're not gonna do water, sewer on the water advisory board.
City.
Right.
Oh, well, that's why it's on there. Okay,
Any other? Anything else, anybody?
Contracts? I think we discussed.
Motion to adjourn, or we're just adjourned?
Yeah.
when's our next meeting?
I don't know. Are we doing what, Thursday, I didn't even know what Tuesday we were at. So this is the third Tuesday, right? I don't know what Angie just came up with for sure on what she
Let's see
was.
here if I got it on my calendar. Today's
The
today's
20.
Tuesday.
The third Tuesday would be the 21, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4,
third
20
Tuesday.
24th?
Yeah, the third Tuesday would be the 17th.
Oh, the 17th,
I thought we
yeah,
were doing
sorry.
Thursdays, I'm not sure. what
Actually,
happened.
17th at 2 P.M.
So are we still doing Tuesdays?
I think that's what you guys decided.
I know, Angie came up with the date, and Tuesdays is
I think it was
fine.
third Tuesday, which is, I think, based a little bit on.
And
Yeah.
still at 2?
Yep, so the 17th of September.
Let me check the.
Yeah.
Why are you sitting out there? Oh, show you.
Cool, thanks, Betty.
You're welcome.
Did I hear
Is that it?
adjourn or
Okay.
no?
Are we
Yeah, we
adjourned?
adjourned.
Okay.
Hi. I don't know if you did it technically in the motion or whatever, but. Sure.
Yeah.
Ready to go, Taylor? Chomping at the bit?
We've got a group in here.
Huh?
There's supposed to be a group in here.
On Tuesday?
I think Angie's working with them on if they're gonna change, but I've got them in here.
You can try.
So I'll. See if they change it. Yeah. Alright.
My dad house out there.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's go.
One of the problems is we face a crisis today. Should have taken care of.
Yeah.
Years.
Nope, that's mine.
Oh, it's yours from your desk.
That's right.
Don't leave home without it.
Nobody knows me.
No easy or fast solution to any of it.
Exactly.
Nobody
So
knows
cheap.
me.
Exactly.
I didn't mean to piss you off, but it's, yeah, I do too. Are we going to the back?
I don't think. I just want like.
You don't have the code.
Hey,
You have
Jason,
the code at the door?
No, I don't.
Jason, better to be pissed off than pissed on, right?
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
One second, let me turn off the video.